I'm going to just welcome everyone. Thanks for coming out this afternoon. We're going to get started. We have a pretty robust agenda this afternoon, but I just want to get started by going around the room just to introduce the name, and then I think Catherine is going to lead in a quick icebreaker before we start.
Yeah, so just when you say your names, I apologize, my dog is barking. When you say your names, try to say the one word that you can think that when you hear the word data.
So when you hear the word data, one word. What, can you repeat that one more time, Catherine?
Yeah, I apologize. So I'll do the example. So I'm Catherine Rattay. I work at the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission. And when I hear that I'm about to hear a presentation on data, I am excited to get all the facts. Excited is my response.
Great. So I'm just going to go around. George.
Yeah, George is here, and data, I think Star Trek.
Great.
George took my answer.
Connor.
I'm Connor O'Shea, and when I think of data, I think of analytics.
Great. Bethany.
I'm Bethany, and when I think of data, I think of curiosity.
Jake.
My name is Jacob Dollinger. I am the GIS analyst for the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission, and when I think data, I think formatting.
Gary.
My name is Gary Rue. I'm a transportation planner with PVPC. When I think of data, I think of finding out fun information.
Joe.
My name is Joe Williams, and when I think of data, my answer was I think of a lot of information.
Fiona.
Hi everyone, I'm Fiona from Barrett Planning Group. When I think of data, I think of cool graphics and visuals and ways to present that data.
Doug.
I'm Doug Hall. I'm the data manager at PVPC, so I may be a little biased. The word that comes to mind first for me is data wonk. And for some of us, we say that as a positive thing.
Lori.
So the first word that came to my mind was charts. Oh, and I'm Lori Tanner with Pioneer Valley Planning Commission.
Amber.
Hi, I'm Amber. I'm the intern at PVPC, and I guess I think of research and stuff from my classes.
Marilyn.
Marilyn Richards, Town Council. When I think of data, I think of many teachable moments.
That's great. Shannon.
Hi there, I'm Shannon Walsh. Can you hear me okay?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm Shannon Walsh. I'm the Historic Preservation Planner for PVPC, and I find data useful.
Mary.
Mary McNally, Town Manager at East Longmeadow. I have a phrase when I hear data, and it's need to assimilate.
That's a good one. I think we have Donna just joined us. Donna, we are introducing ourselves, and when you think of data, what does that mean to you?
That means statistics that support what we're trying to do.
Good.
That's great. And I'm Ken Cormia. I'm land use planner at the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission. And when I think of data, I think of master plans. And that's what we're doing right here. Okay, so I'm just going to quickly share the.
Ken, I don't think Kevin went.
You've got Kevin Duquette.
Yeah,
Kevin. Oh, yes. Hi, Kevin.
Hi, I'm Kevin Duquette, the building commissioner for the town of East Longmeadow. And when I think of data, I think of documents.
All right. So I'm going to just quickly share go quickly through the agenda. Let's see. Right here. Okay, so this is our agenda to this afternoon. We're going to try to keep it to an hour and a half because Catherine and I both have meetings at 5:30. So we are going to start with, we just finished the welcome and introductions. Next is the election of chair, vice chair for the committee. And then we're going to go into presentations by Doug Hall, Jake Dollinger, and then we also have Gary Rue, who's going to be talking a little bit about transportation. And then we're going to talk about the virtual visioning session that we have scheduled, and Fiona from Barrett Planning Group will be interacting right after our PVPC presentations. We're going to then follow up with chapter captains and follow up with just identifying those goals and strategies from past documents and seeing how that fits into our future processes in the next couple of months. So I'm going to go ahead and Bethany, I'm going to look to you to see if there has been any discussion about chair, vice chair since the last meeting.
Only that Pam Blair has said that she has too much on her plate at the moment and would not be able to take up that role.
Okay. Does anyone want to assume chair, vice chair?
I mean, I'd be interested in one of the two of them.
Great,
Okay.
thank you very much.
All right, so Connor, since you're the first to volunteer, let's say that you will be our chair. And then if a vice chair from either Joe or George.
I decline. I've got too much going on at home right now.
Joe?
Yeah, I mean, I'm certainly all for taking up vice chair duties if necessary. I guess I just would need to understand, what it would entail.
Sure, I think, yeah. Quickly, I think it basically is to, between Catherine, myself, Bethany, we'll be sharing agendas with Connor and you, Joe. And then Connor will actually just convene the meeting and kind of lead us through future planning committee agendas. And if Connor's absent, then you would do it. Among some small tasks, other tasks that we'll identify maybe through the process. But that's great. So we have a chair and a vice chair. With that said, then we're gonna let Doug. Doug should have the permission to share his screen. We're gonna get started with those presentations.
All right. So the other word that I considered using was drowning, because I've been drowning in data as I've been, trying to prepare all this. I want to start with a couple of sort of contextual pieces. I feel like the purpose of my presentation, I think, is sort of twofold, maybe 2.5-fold. I'm trying to share information that I have about Longmeadow with you, information that I have done the research to dig up. So providing you with information that can help you make your decisions. In turn, what we're hoping is that you guys can give us some feedback, certainly to the extent that the data that you're seeing here today, if there's anything that seems like that doesn't, pass the gut test with you, please flag that for us, because certainly one of the challenges, and you'll see some of this in the presentation, most of these data sets are based on Census Bureau data, and there's definitely some margins of error there, and sometimes what the numbers tell us aren't necessarily reflecting accurately the reality on the ground. So to the extent that you're aware of there being some different reality, please let us know, and we can do a little bit of extra digging. We can search for alternative sources, that sort of thing. And then the third piece, or second 2.5 piece there's some things, similar to what I just told you about data that I want to share with you, because I think it helps you to better understand the context of the work that we're looking at here. I'm also going to go super quick. I've noted that the time was about 4:10 when I started here. And I know that we want to squeeze in all the presenters from PVPC, and I don't want to overstep my time. So I'm going to go very quickly. You will get a copy of this presentation. There will be an opportunity for questions and answers afterwards. And you'll see on the last slide, I've left my phone number and my email address. Please feel free to contact me directly if you want to follow up on some of the things that we've presented here today. All right, so jumping right in, actually, the first thing I'm gonna do here is I'm going to, I think I can hide that panel. There we go. All right, so I'm gonna start, basically I've broken this into thematic sections. We're starting with the most basic demographics. You can see here that since 1980, East Longmeadow's population has grown steadily. This trend is projected to continue over the next 20 years. You can see that there's a period there between 2000 and 2010 where, you know, the rate of growth bumped up a little bit, but for the most part, we're talking about very much kind of in a slow and steady mindset. While the population has been growing, it's also been becoming increasingly diverse. So if you look back to 2010, 93% of the East Longmeadow population were white non-Hispanic people. And jumping ahead to 2019, it's still, you know, a very large majority, but it's a notably smaller majority. And you can see, you know, definite growth here in these numbers comparing African Americans, Asians, and Hispanic Latino people in East Longmeadow. The population by age, contrary to some of the things that we've seen, what you see here is a story that's reflecting a pretty stable, consistent age mix. You know, there's a little bit of growth in the elderly population and a little bit of growth in the young population. And of course, both of those are coming out of the group in the middle, prime working age adults. But for the most part, you know, the type of community that you have in terms of the mix up of ages is pretty similar. And that's certainly something that you should be thinking about as you're, you know, pondering how to accommodate, you know, seniors who the boomer generation that in general has been growing. And whether you're thinking about whether young families are something that you want to attract into your community or have young people stay in your community, you know, that age mix can be very important. If you look at inflation adjusted median incomes, you see a slight decline in East Longmeadow. Though I would note that the difference between, you know, the 91,000 in 2010 and the 88,000 or so in 2019, that difference is probably for sure in a range where, you know, statistically, that's pretty much the same spot. And, you know, if you compare that to our comparison communities, you know, definitely higher incomes, both in 2010 and 2019 than West Springfield, and less than in Wilbraham in both situations as well. Overall, the overall and child poverty rates in East Longmeadow fall between the rates of West Springfield and Wilbraham. You know, again, we typically see, you know, poverty rates kind of are in sync with income, which makes, of course, a whole lot of sense. This is one example here. If you look at Wilbraham, they're claiming, you know, 0% child poverty. That's a good example where the data are, you know, probably flawed for sure. My recollection is that that 0% came with like a plus or minus 19% range. So that just gives you a sense of the type of range we're talking about here. So you don't want to, you know, hang too much on any of these numbers, but when you see numbers that the general trend, you know, reflects a certain pattern, you know, you can be more confident that that's what you're seeing. Just to highlight here, what do we mean by in poverty? The poverty rate is determined by, it's a household-based measure, and all the people that are in a household where the income is less than the federal poverty limit are considered to be quote unquote in poverty. And you can see here that, you know, for a family of four, the poverty level is $26,500. You know, try feeding a family with that and paying your rent and all those other things. Most of the studies that have been done that kind of look at the cost of living, find that what people really need to make ends meet is an income that's like 2.5 to 3 times greater than the official poverty levels. We see that in East Longmeadow, about 4 in 10 people have incomes of $100,000 or more. Oops, I jumped ahead. Oh, where did that go? Sorry. You know, that compares, you know, with much lower levels in Hampden County. And I think that that's certainly significant. Jumping into the housing data, you see that East Longmeadow has seen a growing number of housing units between 2010 and 2019. And that continues to be, you know, reflected in high occupancy rates and, you know, very little or few, you know, seasonal homes, recreational homes, or that sort of thing. Also pretty high, like the lack of vacant units is also, I think, noteworthy, and also, you know, speaks to rising prices as well, I think. East Longmeadow's housing stock has seen growth in the rental units over time between 2010 and 2019. And you see that, you know, reflected in these numbers. You know, it's not, again, it's not a dramatic increase, but certainly noteworthy. In terms of the types of housing units, you know, if you look at them by the different, you know, the different types of occupancy, et cetera, you can see here pretty clearly that, you know, the vast majority are single unit detached units. But if you're comparing 2010 to 2019, the increases in these sort of middle-sized units, 5 to 9 units or 20 or more units, you know, those are clearly reflecting, you know, some new building probably. I think someone mentioned in a previous run through these data, they had some specific buildings in mind that they thought those reflected. So in terms of the age of the housing stock, you can see here that, you know, East Longmeadow housing is generally much newer than Hampden County overall. And you see that reflected, you know, basically at both ends of this data here. So, you know, much fewer homes that were built in 1939 or earlier, and more homes built after 2000 in East Longmeadow. When you compare over time, you see that, you know, even though we've seen some growth again in the number of housing units built more recently, we're still in a situation where 4 in 10 homes are at least 60 years old. So, you know, prior to these 3 here. Now, this is a good example where I'm looking here at inflation adjusted median rent. And, you know, to me, this data point really jumps out at me. You see here what appears to be like a huge spike in the median rent in East Longmeadow from $458 inflation adjusted in 2010 to $945 in 2019. And that spike is, I think, particularly noteworthy when you compare it to these other, you know, jurisdictions that have like literally not changed, which I found actually pretty striking as well. You know, a little bit of an increase in Hampden County. So just to kind of wrap my head around that a little bit more, I actually looked at the error bars, the errors. Basically, it gives you a sense of what the actual range is, you know, or at least could be. So, you know, with census data, what we have are estimates, and the estimates are always come up with through, you know, sampling, basically people who respond to their census surveys. You know, we crunch those numbers based on the populations that we have there. And you end up in a situation where there's a range. Basically, we know that the real value, the real level of rent in East Longmeadow in 2010, you know, fell between these 2 points, 95 times out of 100. Same situation in 2019. And so, you know, while it seems like, and it's, I think, quite likely that there was a substantial increase, it's possible that that increase was less than what appears to be the case here. You know, it could reasonably have been a level as low as sort of the bottom of this bar, or have been coming from a place that was a little bit higher up here as well. You'll see here in this table, we're looking at the increase in the number of houses and the percent of houses where the rent exceeds 30% of household income. And so you can see here again over time, substantial jump in East Longmeadow from 50% of homes, you know, basically unaffordable essentially by standard measures, jumping up to 56%. And again, that's at a time when Wilbraham and Hampden County overall have seen declines. Slight increase in West Springfield also. So that's certainly striking and reflects, you know, it probably reflects a lack of rental housing units, as well as, you know, economic growth that is driving demand for those units. Speaking of economic growth, as we jump into the economic data, this chart is looking at the labor force in East Longmeadow. So basically, all the people who are either working or are actively looking for work are considered to be in the labor force. And you can see here that my charts are jumping all over the place. You can see, I'm sorry. Come on, here we go. You can see a modest but steady growth in the labor force, really from January 2010, you know, right through until, you know, we hit the peak, you know, December 2019. And then you can see here, you know, these are just like little, you know, seasonal blips that you can more or less ignore. But obviously, you know, come March, we saw a little downtick, and then into April of COVID times, you know, basically the bottom fell out of the labor market. And so, you know, you saw all of that gain erased pretty thoroughly. We have in the months since then, this is actually, I think, a November 2020 data point. You know, we've returned to a place that's actually a little bit above where we started over here, but compared to where we were, you know, we're still in a pretty big hole. And those are people who have left the labor force. They're not even looking for work. So it's very possible that those are parents who might have left the labor force to help their kids with homeschooling and that sort of thing. And certainly in the medium run, you know, that's something we will definitely need to wrap our heads around how to deal with that. Because we have seen a shift that probably won't be permanent, but it will leave some scars that will need to be dealt with over time. If you look at the unemployment rate, you see here East Longmeadow, you know, kind of a similar pattern. The unemployment rate was declining pretty consistently over time, and then spiked with COVID up to 15.7%, notably lower than the overall county rate, but still, you know, compared to the 2% or so that it was prior to COVID, you know, pretty striking. And so now, you know, as of November, we were at about 5%. You know, again, that's much better clearly than 15.7%, but substantially higher than we were prior to COVID. And I think it's reasonable to think that it's going to take a substantial amount of time to return to those same unemployment rates that we had prior. Taking a look at employers, you see here the largest employers in East Longmeadow. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this chart, especially since you'll have it to refer to. But you do get a sense here that there are some, you know, quite substantial employers. You know, there's several that have over 100 workers. And this is, of course, a partial list of all the employers, but I am certainly happy to provide the full list that we have available with you for your planning purposes. So what do we know, though, about East Longmeadow's jobs? Two little pieces of information here, essentially. This is a map that's basically showing where those people are working. you know, predictable patterns for sure. And in terms of the work that's being done, and again, these are people who are working in East Longmeadow, as opposed to the people that that live in East Longmeadow, and more on that in a minute. But really noteworthy that there's still a very strong manufacturing sector in East Longmeadow, with healthcare and social assistance and retail trade, you know, trailing behind. But you know, overall, I think what we're seeing here is a pretty solid pattern of a fairly diverse economy. You know, there's a nice mix of decent of employment sectors where there's a good number of people working. And that's good, especially, you know, we're recognizing, particularly during COVID times, that certain sectors can get hammered really hard. Like right now, you know, retail trade is really hurting badly. Accommodation and food services really hurting badly. So the fact that there's some other sectors that can help to kind of carry us through is certainly helpful. Now, to me, this is, if there's one chart in this presentation that I think is kind of encapsulates what struck me about East Longmeadow, it's this one here. And just to quickly explain what you're seeing here. Of the 8,294 people who work in East Longmeadow, almost all of them, 7,157 of them, are coming into Longmeadow from outside that town. And of the 8,200 people, workers who live in East Longmeadow, almost all of them are leaving East Longmeadow to work. And so, you know, to me, I think it's really cool that you guys are doing this process. And obviously it makes sense that we're showing you, you know, the specific data related to your town. But to me, this really drives home the fact that, you know, really all the towns in the Pioneer Valley are interdependent on each other. And, you know, we always know that whatever is happening in the regional economy, whether it's, you know, challenging situations in the larger cities, it has an effect on the smaller towns as well, and vice versa. And I think in some ways that can be a strength, but it's only a strength when we recognize it and we can figure out, you know, working together how to best move forward. And just to give you a sense of where those folks are going when they're leaving East Longmeadow to work, you see here that, you know, Springfield is the largest group outside of East Longmeadow, and then Enfield, Chicopee, you know, West Springfield, basically the larger cities and towns in the area, and mostly looking, you know, to the west towards, you know, I-91, et cetera. And that's, you know, interesting. This is a table that's showing, you know, the top, whatever, 10, 12-ish. I think it's important to recognize too that over a third of the workers here, 34.9%, are outside of, you know, those communities. So, you know, the distances that some people are traveling, pretty substantial. Where do East Longmeadow workers live? You know, again, this is where people are coming from to come into East Longmeadow, and, you know, very similar pattern in terms of the communities that it's drawing from. And here's a sense of the distance that people are traveling to come into East Longmeadow to work. All right, taxes. Everybody loves talking about taxes. What's interesting to me, you know, in these slides is there's, you know, East Longmeadow certainly, you know, it's fairly much in sync with the comparison communities. You know, again, here we're comparing to West Springfield and Wilbraham. Greater reliance on residential than West Springfield, which has a substantially higher reliance on commercial. And, you know, it's kind of like the thing with Jesse James, you know, someone asked him, why did you rob the bank? And he's like, well, that's where the money is. And so, you know, part of why West Springfield's relying more heavily on commercial taxes is because, you know, they've got some more substantial commercial developments there. You can see that the mix of assessed land has been pretty steady over time since 2005, with a slight increase of reliance over time on personal property. And here's the percentages that we're looking at in the 2021 budget. And how does this impact families? So, you know, the average single family tax bill for East Longmeadow in 2021 of about $6,000. Again, you know, it's pretty comparable to Wilbraham, but substantially higher than West Springfield. It's 53% higher than in West Springfield. And again, that's partly because West Springfield is relying more heavily on the commercial tax. Even when adjusted for inflation, this average single family tax rate, you know, the amount that people are paying has increased over time. You know, it's not like through the roof, but certainly there's very steady growth there that's reflected in these numbers. Again, here, these are actually looking at the rates. And you see here again, you know, East Longmeadow has the same rate across all categories. West Springfield, unlike most communities, has a different rate for residential than for these other categories, you know, giving homeowners a bit of a break, a bit of an incentive there. And when you look at the actual mill rate for East Longmeadow over time, it's been pretty stable since 2014. You know, basically in here to here, it's, you know, it blips up and down a tiny bit, but for the most part, you know, there was growth through here, following decline here, and it's almost like, you know, they decided, you know, we're gonna lower our taxes, and then they, you know, got to here and realized that was maybe a mistake, and we can't afford the things that we need to be doing to make our community strong, to make the investments we need. All right, that's my piece. And I think we're going to wait for questions until the end of all the presentations. So I will stop sharing and turn it over to the next presenter.
Yes, thank you. We have the questions that we collected in the chat box, and we'll go over those after Gary provides his presentation. But continue to put your comments in there and questions for Jake's and Gary's, and then we can address all of them at the end.
All right, well, I guess I'm up. Hello again, everyone. My name is Jacob Dolinger. I am the GIS analyst for the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission. So just bear with me for a moment while I get my screen share up here. Make sure I'm doing this right. Okay, can everyone see that? Great. So I too, like Doug, have gathered up various data sets for this project and presentation. I've crafted the data obviously into GIS maps for review, and also a couple of different tables of data as well. The table data obviously is represented here as little snippets. The full tables are not in here. It's just to give you an idea, a representation of the data that was generated that can be analyzed at a later date. But really what we're doing here with this GIS data is kind of getting started. And I have included thus far more or less what you might refer to as the usual suspects in regards to the GIS maps and data sets that would be required for a master plan. I've included a couple of extra data sets that perhaps the working group may decide either to leave in, enhance, remove. Obviously, it's up to the group. But in just an overview, we have maps such as regional context, water resources.
Hey, sorry to interrupt. Can you, it's stuck on your, it's not on slideshow, and I just see like all of the slides.
Oh.
So if you want to.
Let's see, that's weird.
I think we had this issue at the last meeting where you had to like reconnect.
Let's see, it's showing full screen for me. Hold on, let's see here.
Jake, it's showing us biking and walking and then 3 little inserts of Mass GIS protected open space. You're seeing 4 maps at the same time.
Okay, let me see what I can do here. I have full screen Maybe I have
I
to.
think sometimes on Zoom, like if you're presenting it, you have to hit display options and tell it to like switch your monitor so that like we see the full screen, but you see the presenter deck.
Okay. Hold on 1 second here. Sorry about this technical difficulty. All right.
Welcome to Pamela and Mary Beth's iPhone.
Hi, Pam.
Oh. Let's try to share that. Now you guys should be seeing like the full PowerPoint presentation, correct?
Nope.
It's
Put it on slideshow.
well, I mean, you're seeing all the slides, right?
Yes.
Okay. Now, are you seeing a full screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Back in action. So let's see, where were we? FEMA flood data by tax parcel. This is a data set that I have generated a spreadsheet for. I didn't generate a map for it because the FEMA flood zone layers are represented on other maps. But this is a table that would allow you to go through and analyze parcel by parcel which properties are affected by the FEMA flood zones. We have prime farmland soils included. As I'm sure you're aware, there are not many in East Longmeadow, but there are some. Infrastructure, zoning, unique environments. Again, a unique environments is another one where the group may want to assess its utility and or supplement its content. There was not a lot for me to add at this time for that map, but we can get into that when we're reviewing it. A land use map. This, again, I would like to give a brief caveat that this is the 2016 data set. This is the new data set that has been developed by MassGIS, and it is a multi-layered data set. So it looks quite a bit different than the 2005 data set that people are used to reviewing. And should it prove difficult to work with, we can bring in the 2005 data set as well and kind of work with the two in tandem with one another. I also did a protected and recreational open space analysis and map that will show all of the Executive Office of Environmental Affairs protected and recreational open space, as well as all chapter lands as extracted from the tax parcels, including mixed use chapter lands, which in East Longmeadow, there are quite a bit. There's actually more mixed use chapter lands than just regular straight chapter lands. And then there will be more to come. Economic development maps as those chapters start to move along, historic preservation and transportation data. I do have a little bit of transportation data that I'm going to share with you. And obviously, Gary will be sharing from the transportation section. I'm sorry. So just briefly, the regional context map is exactly as it says. Kind of showing where East Longmeadow is in relation to the state, the county, and we do zoom in the city itself so that we can get or anything of that nature.
Jake, have you advanced slides yet or no?
No, I haven't.
Okay.
There we go. Okay. So water resources. I'm just going to kind of run through the different data sets that are represented on these maps. And please, if you have any questions, just interrupt me and feel free to interrupt me and I can answer them as we go, or I can answer them at the end if you're more comfortable with that as well. The water resources map is one where there's not a lot to show because the city is not pulling from public wells. It doesn't have any outstanding water resource watersheds. So largely it's just showing that, the town is completely within the Connecticut River watershed, and it shows where the FEMA flood zone layers are via 100 and 500 year flood zones. I did also add in an additional data set that is not typically represented, which is the hydrologic connections data set. And basically what that is, those are seeps and swale wetlands. They're not technically intermittent streams. They're obviously not perennial streams. They're sort of wetland features, if you will, linear wetland features. Next we have the soils and geological features map. You can see here, you know, there are prime farmland soils in East Longmeadow. I'm not aware of how much farming is actually occurring in East Longmeadow. The land use data indicates a very small percentage. So while this is prime farmland soil, you know, these are underlying soils largely in residential areas. It also shows slopes of greater than 15%. And the relevance of those are that they are typically impediments to development. A slope of 15% is a pretty decent slope and is typically considered an impediment to development. Next, we have city infrastructure. Here is another map where it would be great to get further input from the working group. You know, what is important? What do they want to see on here? What have we not included? What needs to be removed? You can see that I have added in the transmission lines that run through East Longmeadow. You have the Tennessee Gas, and you have an online and an offline line, electric transmission lines. I don't know if those are necessarily relevant to the master plan because I'm not sure exactly how the city may be tapping into those directly, or whether or not they're simply infrastructure that exists in the city and is worth noting in case of emergency, in case of flooding, in case of disaster. Certainly it's worth inventorying those rather large infrastructure pieces, especially since they're carrying natural gas, at least one of them anyways. But you can see I've added here some water lines, sewer lines, some of the other water and sewer infrastructure such as pumping stations, both for drinking water and wastewater. We have the water storage tanks, radio communications, telephone cross boxes. Oh, that actually is in there by error. I'm sorry, I'll have to remove the telephone cross boxing. I put in the schools, city halls, fire station, and police. It looks like the state police will want to be removed as well. So again, this is a data set that I think would benefit greatly from local input in terms of developing importance and content. Then we have, oh, I'm just keep doing that, sorry. Move this thing. There we go. Zoning. So this is what I have for zoning data. Again, this would be another area where we may need to revise based off of changes to zoning over the years. This data set is relatively old. I have to pull up the metadata for it, but I believe it's circa 2007. So I'm not sure to what degree the zoning has changed over the years. So we will definitely want to look at that and potentially address that. But this is the most up-to-date data set that I had at my disposal, and was used as recently as 2016 for other projects. And I did not have an additionally updated data set. So I went with this being the best available. Let's see. Here's the unique environments map that I was talking about before, where this is typically populated with biomap 2 data and the Nature Conservancy core resilient habitats. For the Nature Conservancy data, there's actually none. There's none present in East Longmeadow. So I opted not to even include it on the legend. And sometimes I'll do that. I'll put it in the legend and I'll say none present. But since it's not a requirement, I just left it off completely. And also you can see that the last category in the bottom of the legend, Biomap 2, Critical Natural Landscape, there is very little of it. It actually lies underneath of the Biomap 2 data and the Biomap 2 core habitat. So you're not actually seeing it here. But in a lot of municipalities, you'll see that natural landscape will extend out much greater than these kind of areas of concern and focus. So that was interesting to note that the Biomap 2, aside from these very specific areas of interest and concern, other than that, it did not produce kind of a flowing natural landscape, if you will, through East Longmeadow. Again, that's a remote analysis that has done, which while I don't think the kind of core calculation would change, I think that in terms of unique environments, I think local knowledge could greatly enhance this data set if the group is looking to pursue that. Next, we have the MassGIS Land Use 2016 aggregated data. What I do with this data set is different, as I said, from the 2006 data set, and that it is a multi-tiered data set. The old data set used to just assign a land use to an area, and there was a polygon shaped to represent that area on the map, and then it was either residential, or it was commercial, or it was industrial. This process creates 3 layers on top of one another. It creates a very precise land use code, which would be the land use code that's extracted from the tax parcels. So it would be, you know, a 101 or a 131 or a 703, whatever it may be. And then it creates a general land use code where it would say, so if you have, say you have a 101 or a 131, which are residential, it would create a general land use code, which would say high density land use or low density land use. It then goes one step further and tries to illustrate what the land cover over top of that land use may be. And then when it represents that data on the map that you're looking at, what it does is it evaluates by hierarchy. So it says, you know, and if you zoom in and you see a yellow area, you'll see that that is a residential area, and it shows as yellow. And what you're to assume is that entire area is developed and there's no tree cover there. But within that tax parcel where you see that yellow is surrounding tree cover, underneath of that tree cover is actually the residential land use as well. And so what the map is representing is it's kind of representing 2 things at once, and it's leaving the user to discern the importance of the data that's being consumed through the layering process. That's all well and good when we're looking at the graphic representation on the map, but when it gets into analyzing the data, it presents a little bit of an issue. So what we have decided to do in working with this data, since it was released, is to aggregate it, and to aggregate by those 3 varying layers. And what you can see here in this table that I've extracted is aggregated down just to the general use name. So when you take all of East Longmeadow's land use data and you aggregate it down to the general use code, you get just this, about a dozen or so, and then you can calculate percentages. Remember, we had talked about agricultural, and it is showing here that in a general land use sense, there's approximately 2.1% of land is agricultural. We do that for the sake of convenience and expedience, but I also break down the data in all 3 categories and create tables. So I also break it down by general use code and cover name, and then I break it down all the way to specific land use code, and I generate tables for each one of those so that we can go in and we can evaluate those data sets tabularly and calculate percentages for land uses. Okay. So that is the basic rundown of the land use maps and data. Next, we have the protected and recreational open space inventory. For this map and the associated tables, what I do is, but the term that we use is parcelization. We take the Executive Office of Environmental Affairs protected and recreational open space data set, and I do what's called parcelizing it. I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with the EEOA data set, but it is notoriously inaccurate for its it's historically inaccurate for its adherence to the tax parcels, meaning that a lot of the shapes that they put out are rough estimates of the protected area. And so then when you lay those shapes onto a map and you lay tax parcels over them, it just looks like a total mess. And it looks like, you know, one protected area may be falling in a tax parcel where it doesn't belong and vice versa. So what I do is I go in and I take all of the data and I rectify it to match the tax parcels. I then do a little GIS trickery and I take the tax parcel data and I append it to the EEOA data. So then the result is a spreadsheet that gives you each of the open space ID numbers, the associated map parcel ID, and then it's not shown here in this table because I couldn't really fit it all obviously on a slide, but it also gives you all of the other EEOA, or I'm sorry, EOEEA data, and as all of the tax parcel data for each and every one of the protected and recreational open space properties. So then you can go in and really get into what the ownership is, you know, what the property values are and everything that is associated with the tax parcels. For the Chapter 61 lands, what I do is I go into the tax parcel data and I just go in and I select by land use code, selecting all 600, 700, 800, and mixed use values for 61, 61A, and 61B parcels. I generate a table that also lists all of those properties. And obviously, since they're extracted from the tax parcel data, you're able to see all of the associated information. On the map here, we display the protected and recreational open space by its primary purpose. We then overlay the owner type, whether municipal, private, nonprofit, private, for-profit. There are other categories, but these were the ones present in East Longmeadow. Level of protection. And then, of course, as I said, we have the chapter lands. There is some overlap between EOEEA's data set and the Chapter 61 data set extracted from the tax parcels. Unfortunately, it's not there's always just like a handful that for some reason there's always a handful of Chapter 61 properties that show up in the protected and recreational open space, and it's relatively inconsistent. So I usually just give that disclaimer and don't bother to go in and extract them, and then as they pop up through evaluation, we just delete them. But that is the protected and recreational open space inventory. And lastly, what I'll touch on just briefly is some biking and walking data that we are lucky to be able to receive from both MAPC, which is, and Mass DOT. And the MAPC data is a local access walk score. This is where MAPC has gone in through a geoprocessing effort and brought in various data sets, and including the road and sidewalk lines, to determine the walkability of a given area and whether or not, obviously, pedestrians, you know, have a smooth egress through the area. I would say that it also it provides opportunity for you know, determining development. If you have areas necessarily where the walk score is low, you have opportunity for improvements. If you have areas where the walk score is high, you have opportunity to implement measures to encourage use. Additionally, what you're seeing here, basically as the underlay to those pink and purple lines, is the Mass DOT potential for everyday biking evaluation. Now, this is a data set that is relatively new from Mass DOT, where they have, again, gone in and done a geospatial analysis and developed this data set that indicates where you have the most potential to for everyday biking, and so then therefore presumably the most need or targeted area for bicycle infrastructure. And so you can see here that in East Longmeadow, it is relatively relatively low in terms of potential for everyday biking. I'm going to attempt to switch over to another window so that I can show you this online tool that we had built for the project. Let's see here. And I'm going to stop sharing this and I'm going to share this. Hopefully you can all see this. Can you all see this online map?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Okay.
Now we do.
Now you can see it. Okay, great. Let me just pull this up. And so you can see I just want you to get a sense of the potential for everyday biking values. You can see these numbers. Basically, you can look at this and say this is lowest potential to highest potential. The numeric value is just a calculation of all the various inputs and really has no significant meaning to the layperson other than lowest to highest value. But you can see the majority of the city is in the lowest value. But there are some opportunities. And then also it's how you interpret the usage of this data. You could say, well, there's not a lot of potential in these other areas, and perhaps we need to pay attention and bring in infrastructure there to increase the potential for everyday biking. So these are data sets that are provided by MAPC and Mass DOT, and they are in this online viewer. And this online viewer can be accessed. Ken will put a link to this so that the working group can access all of this. I believe you can probably access it straight through the link in the PDF for the PowerPoint presentation as well. I think those links will jump right from there. Additionally, there's some table data in here that you can go through, and you can also export any of the table data, make selections and various things of that nature. That more or less wraps up my section here on GIS mapping and data. Are there any questions?
So Jake, what I'm going to do is ask Gary to start setting up, but George has provided some data layers in the chat that I think we'll need to explore to include in future maps.
Okay.
Some gaps, and I'm sure that with regards to the natural resources section and the pros map, we'll have a conversation on how to include and make sure that all the parcels are covered there.
Sure. Let me see here. I'm sorry, I just have to read through these quickly.
Well, maybe Jake, if you could start answering them in the chat while Gary's talking, and then if we have time, we can do questions at the end.
Okay, sure.
Yes.
All right, are we set to go, Ken?
Yes, thanks, Gary.
Everybody see this slide says transportation chapter?
Yeah.
Great, thank you. So again, my name is Gary Rue. I'm in the transportation section at PVPC, and I wanted to just give you a brief overview of what we expected to include as some of the content in the transportation chapter. I do have a few examples of some products and mostly on safety data for the town, but we also have some interesting data on usage on the Redstone Trail. So I thought we'd take the opportunity to show you what we have. The transportation chapter is really meant to give you an overview of your existing transportation infrastructure, what you own, what you maintain, what's there for both vehicle use and non-vehicle use. You do have a couple of PVTA routes that serve East Longmeadow, so we'll make sure we're actually working on it right now to get you some ridership information and how those two routes are being used. We hope to be able to collect some or obtain some data on, at least on what's available for senior van service. Then we'll talk about daily traffic volumes, the bike path volumes, get into the safety data, crash history for the town. We believe we're going to be able to get some data on congestion and travel speeds from vehicle probe data. And the good news on this is we'll be able to get it pre-COVID. We'll be looking at 2018 or 2019, so we can show some of the locations where traffic is experiencing a bottleneck. Of course, we know the Rotary has a long history of problems, but we're concerned about the entire town. Then finally, we'll be looking at least on the pavement side, we'll be looking at the functionally classified roadway system. We do collect that data on a 4-year rotational basis for the regional transportation plan update. So we'll pull that data and look at pavement condition data. You have a number of traffic signals in town, so it's really important to make sure that those are being talked about. And then we're aware of a number of previous studies, your sidewalk master plan, recent complete streets prioritization plan. I can't remember the year, but we did do a user survey on the Redstone Rail Trail. And then the 1999 East Longmeadow Rotary study is still going to have some interesting data and useful data despite its age. So we'll pull data out of that as it is appropriate. Looking at your historic count data, I like to look at 10 to 15 years of data. We went back to 2003. This is data from PVPC's database. We normally, when we would do a transportation chapter, one of the things that we would be doing at a meeting like this is identifying where we want to collect more data. It's not really appropriate to do that right now because the numbers are lower. And if we look at the number here from 2020 on Porter Road, you'll see it's just below 6,000 vehicles per day compared to almost 7,500 vehicles a day. So down over 1,500 vehicles a day from 2019 to 2020. That's pretty common. We're seeing that in most locations in the region. And but the hesitancy I have with collecting any data right now is our peak hours of travel. Those morning commute hours and those evening commute hours are just extremely different. In most cases, the morning commute is just not there. You're not seeing the spike in traffic in some of the locations. And we are seeing just a need to track this data, but we can't really rely on it for anything. So what we're going to do is we'll look at some of this historic data. I am seeing right off the bat, we're not seeing a lot of growth. We're seeing, you know, a little bit of fluctuation up and down, which is quite normal. But what we need to do is to attempt to find other resources and fill in some of these holes for the data that we don't really have except on Porter Road in the recent years. So we'll make an attempt to get more data and check out additional resources to find that. Similarly, we looked at the bike count data. We actually have some really good data here. And what's very interesting to me is you want to focus on the blue line. That's our 2020 data. I wouldn't pay attention to May. We probably had the counter out at the end of May, but you're looking at total usage during the month. And you're seeing that our usage in 2020 is higher than previous months. That's not unusual from other areas in Massachusetts. I think you're following the same trend if more people are out using these facilities right now. But it's nice to be able to compare that to the green line 2018 and see in some cases, looking at August and October of 2020, you have a significant increase in the number of users per month on these facilities. And what we'll do is we'll try to break some of this down even further as part of this transportation chapter. Get into the safety data. This is a product that we call the Safety Compass. It's currently under development, but I did ask staff to prioritize East Longmeadow and getting this information done. It's looking at 3 years of safety data from Massachusetts Department of Transportation. We don't go past what Mass DOT calls finalized data. So that's why we haven't included data past 2017 at this point. We recognize that the data will change. In some cases, continues to be refined. When we go into this data, one of the biggest efforts for staff is to clean it up. There's a lot of duplicate information. There's a lot of information that needs to be verified. And once we're able to do that, we feel a lot more confident about what we're reporting. But as part of the safety compass effort, we plot out the most recent 3 years of finalized data from Mass DOT for every community in our region. We identify, as you can see in the green, these non-motorized crash locations. The red locations represent where a fatality occurred. And then we identify your top 5 crash locations and relevant statistics on all the crashes. What we are seeing trend-wise is the number of crashes in East Longmeadow is within that 375 to 400 crashes per year. There's no real trend upwards or downwards. And if I go out even further, multiple years, it's pretty similar. We see between 350 and 400 crashes per year. That is true for what's reported so far in 2018 and 2019 as well. We are showing the crashes in 2 ways, both by the number of crashes, but also by what we call the equivalent property damage only, EPDO, which is a manner of reporting on the severity of the crash. In this methodology, a crash that involved a fatality or an injury is weighted by 21 points, and every other crash is weighted by 1 point. So it places a greater emphasis on the crashes that have resulted in serious injuries and fatalities. And it's prioritizing both Massachusetts and the federal emphasis on safety and safety performance, investing in areas that are having a high level of fatal and injury crashes, and identifying projects to improve safety. So if we look at, no surprise, the number 1 crash location, the Rotary, EPDO score of 580, a total of 180 crashes. The next location, number 2, is Allen at Porter with 21 crashes over 3 years, but a really high EPDO score of 141 for a total of 21 crashes. And what surprised me was the intersection of Shaker Road and Pease Road. Only 8 crashes over 3 years, but an EPDO of 108. So most of those crashes involved an injury. It is something that, the injury crashes we really tried to pay close attention to, because there are a number of safety measures that can be put in that if you can at least reduce the speed of the vehicle, you can really increase the odds of the crash not resulting in an injury or fatality. So these are the basic summary of crash data that we have for the town. We also came up with a number of tables and charts contributing code of the driver, what may have contributed to the crash. This data is getting better. Why do I say getting better? You notice no improper driving. There's 1,300 instances where no improper driving. Well, something is contributing to the crash. We're hoping over time the safety officers begin reporting more and more on this, but we are seeing distraction, failure to yield, and following too closely as some of the common things that are being reported as what's happening. And also the same with first harmful event. It tells us, collision with a motor vehicle in traffic, two or more vehicles are colliding. That's the majority of your crashes. But 70 of your crashes included collisions with a parked vehicle, which is somewhat significant, and it's probably an isolated location where this is happening and worthy of more investigation. But by using, we'll go through this data, we'll come up with a number of, things that stand out to us, and we'll include that information. I did go into much more detail just on the rotary itself. You look at those 180 crashes that happened over the 3-year period, and we are seeing, really not a lot of injury crashes in this location. We're seeing the majority of crashes are property damage. So low injury crashes, typically indicating it's not high speed crashes. You have the stop sign for all the vehicles entering the rotary, so that could be influencing the speed and resulting in less severe crashes at this location. But we are seeing, for the most part, they're angle collisions. No surprise if you've driven through it. It's pretty. You've got a lot of conflicts that you have to pay attention to. We're not seeing as many rear end collisions as I would have, but a fair number of side swipe collisions, and that's I think due to the uncertainty of where you need to be at times as you're trying to drive through there. So again, just some very brief and basic information. We're going to continue to expand on this. We're going to add in our transit data, as Jake was talking about, with the potential for everyday biking. There's a lot of things that we can gather from that data. I think the main point with that data is that we have the ability to go in and actually use that methodology and try to adapt it more to our region. And that's something that we've just begun to do with staff, but we'll make every attempt to make it useful and something that you can incorporate into this master plan. So that's all I have, and happy to answer questions.
Great, thank you, Gary. I'm not sure if we had any for transportation. I know that Doug was continuing to answer the questions there, and we provided some additional documents for folks to download. Please be reminded that this PowerPoint and everything that has been presented today will be posted on our website, including a lot of these new links. And what I'll do is whatever's in the chat, we'll also put on the website so that you can see some of the answers to your questions that Doug has provided in advance. And then just so that we're aware of the comments that came from this meeting for our future discussions. I'm not sure if there's any last questions before we move to the next item, which is our visioning session. Anyone have any quick questions for either Doug, Jake, or Gary before we move on to Fiona? Oh, okay. So Fiona, why don't you
Can everybody see my screen?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, awesome. Let me just start from the beginning. Hi, everybody. I believe I have met almost everybody at this stage. My name is Fiona. I am a consultant with Barrett Planning Group, working with PVPC on the visioning session on the 13th. So I will be leading the session, and my colleague Alexis Lanzolata, who couldn't make it to this meeting, will also be there. This is our information, and happy to follow up with that information afterward. And you can also reach out to Ken and Catherine, who are in regular communication with us for that. So this is a rough outline of how the session is going to go. You really only need to pay attention to the shaded boxes at the top. Essentially, what we're going to be doing is having a PowerPoint presentation at the beginning of the session, where we will introduce ourselves, explain what a master plan is for those folks who don't know, what visioning is and why it's important, and also have kind of some fun activities as well, where we'll do a fun facts slide and also have a slide on some of the demographic data that was discussed today by the speakers before myself. And also just a synopsis of outreach efforts that have been conducted thus far. And from there, we are going to do a review of past goals and action items from plans prior to this master plan. This came up in a prior meeting, and we also find that it's important to make sure that folks are aware that there were, all the planning efforts that have been put into place in East Longmeadow prior to this resilient master plan, and getting an understanding of, if those goals and action items are still relevant. So we will be doing a poll, about 5 slides, I believe, where we'll be teasing out, asking folks to participate, saying, are these, what do you think? Like, do you agree, yes or no? Based on, we'll have the planned name and then, the question. So, and then from there, after the poll, we will go into breakout groups. So we are assuming about 5 breakout groups with 10 people each. If we don't get that number of folks, we'll just do we won't bother with the breakout groups, and we will do kind of a larger discussion. But hopefully we do get that, we want as many people as possible, of course. So that's what we're planning for. And so when we are distributed into our breakout groups, we will be doing a SWOT analysis. I know that a lot of the planners in this group are probably well aware of a SWOT. For those who don't know, it's a strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats exercise. So we will be basically posing, very, very simple questions, what are the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats in East Longmeadow, and stimulate a discussion around that. What we will be using, I'm going to jump ahead to a little bit. So this is our SWOT here. What we'll be using to conduct the SWOT analysis in the breakout groups is an app called Padlet, and essentially what it is a online visioning board. It's very simple. We'll be providing links to the discussion leaders, and they will just populate the Padlet as people chat. So you see here, this screen shows all of the groups on right here, but every group will have its own individual column, and then when we reconvene at the end of the breakout groups, we can all go over and summarize kind of the key themes that were recurring during our discussions. So as I mentioned, we'll reconvene, and then at the end we will offer ways to stay engaged, contact information, again, a summary slide of anything that attendees will need, and links to the Padlet. We are hoping to post the Padlet on the project website and open up, so anyone who couldn't attend the visioning session has the opportunity to provide their feedback. So I just want to talk a little bit very quickly here about the fun facts slide. This is an example of a fun facts infographic that my firm had made for another town. We found this to be a really rewarding and fun experience, and I think a lot of folks like to do this. So we were just going to have a slide of fun facts, and we would appreciate anybody who has a fun fact to share it with us. You all know your town better, way better than we do, and we'd love to hear. So ideally by February 5th, if you could send me a fun fact, or Ken or Catherine, and I will put my email in the chat once I am done with my little spiel here, so anyone can reach out to me with their fact. And as we talk, so this slide is basically a very short synopsis of what the job description for the folks who will be in the breakout groups. We're trying to keep it as simple as possible, utilizing the tools that are provided already on Zoom, and just kind of having an organic, natural, easy discussion where people feel, they can make their voice heard, and just posing some questions for them. And we will be following up with a more detailed outline of role descriptions and instructions for everybody. After this presentation, we'll need to finalize our list of volunteers before we doing that, which brings me to my last slide, which is a call for volunteers. Is if I want to ask if anybody on the committee is interested in leading a breakout group discussion. At the moment, I believe we have about 5 PVPC staff members who will be on the at the session, including and also myself and my colleague Alexis. But I wanted to ask if anybody was interested in helping to facilitate a small group discussion.
I'm open to it as long as I know what the topic is ahead of time, so I'm prepared.
Definitely, yep. We will be sending the SWOT questions for you and the Padlet link and all of that fun stuff. But yeah, thank you, Connor, for stepping up. That's awesome. Is anybody else interested? Okay, no worries.
George here. I could probably lead a group.
Awesome, thank you. Great.
Fiona, I'm happy to step in too.
Oh, thank you.
Yep.
Great. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.
Mary Beth Dowd chatted that she would be willing to help as well.
Excellent. Okay. Awesome. And you know, as I mentioned, I feel like I'm a broken record, but I'm going to try and we're keeping this really quite simple and very straightforward. So I know that this seems a little daunting at first when I'm explaining everything at once, but we'll have plenty of time to do a test run ahead of the session, and you'll be provided with anything and everything you need from us. And so once we get the list of volunteers and staff finalized, I'll send out a poll and we can all coordinate schedules and go over, a test run then. And I think other than that, I have gone over everything that we need at this time. Yes, okay, and then just sending the fun facts by the 5th. And yeah, that's great. Thank you to Connor, George, and Joseph for stepping up. I really appreciate it and looking forward to having a fun session.
Great, thank you.
Fiona, Joe had asked in the chat, is the Padlet basically a place to gather the comments from the participants? And if so, are we organizing it by the 7 sections of the master plan?
So the Padlet is basically just a place to record what's discussed in the groups and by strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, and then it's not chapter specific or topic specific. It's really supposed to be it's just an open kind of open discussion about what's your favorite thing about East Longmeadow, what makes it great, what could be improved, kind of keeping the line of questioning pretty general, because this is this information will inspire the vision statement. So we're not getting into the finite details just yet.
Okay. Thanks. Hey, just Fiona, on a follow up on that, for lack of a better word, do we want to steer people to maybe try and answer questions that are relevant to, the chapters in a way? I don't know if that's possible, or if this is just basically we're just trying to just gather people's general opinions about how they feel about the town, and what their thoughts are on things that they could be improved or that are great or so on.
I would say focus more so on getting kind of their general opinions and feedback. But usually once the conversation starts, especially when you get into the weaknesses and threats, the specific items usually come out. So yeah, I think it will be inevitable that people focus on specifics. But yeah, try your best to keep it general.
Okay, no problem.
Thank you.
Yep.
Great.
And before we can go to the full screen again, Fiona, but I just wanted to make sure that in addition to all of you who volunteered to facilitate breakout sessions, which is fantastic, we need all of you to bring at least 10 people to the visioning session and preferably more because, I mean, we're doing outreach. We have posters, it's on the website and everything. But if you can personally take responsibility for telling 10 people in your network that this is happening and when it's happening and how easy it is to sit down at their computer and turn it on and log on, they don't have to drive and all that stuff. That would be great because we really want to have a representative group. Yeah, go ahead, Pamela.
Hi, everybody. I just looked for the poster and I couldn't, sorry. I just
Lori,
looked for the poster and I couldn't find it.
Okay, just go ahead, Pam, and then we'll tell you.
Oh, sure. I just wanted to say, first of all, I'm sorry that I was late for this meeting. We were in a negotiation meeting, and going forward, we've now booked it on a different day. So we should be good going forward. So Gordon does apologize. He couldn't join you. He was still in that meeting, but we are sending out that flyer to our families at the school. I did watch your last meeting, so we were aware of what you were hoping we could do. And it is on our Monday night school committee meeting agenda to make that announcement. So I just wanted to share that with you. Okay.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Pam.
And the poster, Laura, you said you didn't see it on the website?
Yeah, I know I saw it before, but I can't find it again.
I have it under the planning and community development page and also under the planning board page, I believe.
Yes, that's on the East Longmeadow website.
On the East Longmeadow website.
But on our project website too, we do have that. Our webmaster put that up, or should have, and if not, then we'll make sure that it gets there. But at the same time, Bethany, if she hasn't already, will be receiving hard posters or hard copies of posters that she can plaster throughout town, and the committee, I think, can discuss with her if they want to be able to take some of those posters and post elsewhere. Okay, so with that said, we are at 5:30 or 5:29, and in reality, the only two other agenda items that we had were specific to chapter captains. I know that we have a listing of chapter captains, and if we haven't already shared it with PVPC staff, we will. Bethany has populated a Google file for us to share with our PVPC staff. I know that Shannon, our historic and cultural planner, has been in contact with I forgot his name, but has been in contact with that person. And I know that I'll be talking to George with regards to some of the ideas with the pros map and interact with him there. And I'm sure others that are working on the chapters will interact as we need to. And I see that Catherine is waving, and she has
to go. Sorry. Great.
And then I think finally the last item was specific to the goals and strategies from previous planning documents, and Fiona did bring that item up, and I think it's important, if you haven't already, on our project website, we have shared that spreadsheet that our intern Amber had prepared a synthesis of those goals and strategies from previous planning documents from the town. Fiona and her team will facilitate a conversation based on those that I think, just to be aware of maybe past, discussions with regards to the way that the planning of how development and conservation within town has happened. I know that George provided staff some comments with regards to the 1976 master plan, and we'll be able to take those into consideration when we start drafting our chapters, if we haven't already. And then I think that was it regarding that. I don't know if there's any other comments that anyone wanted to bring up. And if not,
just making sure, Ken, so that the comments, like for the top 3 like goals and stuff on all the previous plans, you want us to just email Fiona those?
Well, no, I think you can share that with Catherine and I, and then we'll filter that out to Fiona.
Okay.
And I think that would be very helpful, just to kind of guide what those conversations are going to look like. And our engagement consultant, so Fiona and her team, is not only going to be at the visioning session. We're going to have this continuous discussion after the visioning session. And our next meeting, next committee meeting, which is scheduled for February 24th, will include obviously a debriefing of the visioning session, probably a revisit of some of the survey questions that has been done in the fall. Yeah, continue to use the project website as a resource. You know, we try to keep it updated as quickly as possible. I know that after this meeting and well, after my meeting at 5:30, I will be uploading or trying to upload the this meeting so that people are aware of the presentations. And I do have the presentations from Doug, Jake, and Gary that will incorporate you know, into our project website, and those documents will be there as well. So use that as a resource. Fiona did provide her email in the chat if you want to you know, discuss with her the fun facts. I think that's going to be a lot of fun. But if that's it, I don't know if there's any last minute comments. If not, as Catherine said, outreach and bring those folks into our meeting. We're excited for a Saturday and get to spend a Saturday in East Longmeadow virtually. We'd rather be it in person, but obviously virtually will do. And I think we're going to have a great session.
Well, thank you, Ken, and we will see everybody on the 13th.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.